Welcome into another episode of the Fat Guy Podcast. I am the Fat Guy. Most people just call me Brett. Thank you so much for coming along and checking out the podcast today. I really do appreciate it. Real quick, before I go another step further, I want to let you know that yes, there's ads. Usually at the beginning, one will pop up in the middle of the podcast at some point, and usually there's one at the very end. Not because I'm trying to get rich, because I'm just trying to offset the cost of hosting. So, a couple things. If you put up with those ads and listen, look, I'm grateful for that. You know what? In the world today, you don't have to sit and listen to ads. You just don't. You can find something that doesn't have ads. So I apologize for that. The other thing I'd like to say is if you don't like the ads, please consider becoming a patron. It's if you think that what we do here is valuable, if I've helped you lose weight, if I've informed you in any kind of way about keto or carnivore, or Atkins, or low carb, or intermittent fasting, or extended fasting, or time restricted eating, or I've helped you lose weight, or I've given you some kind of health advice. If I've done any of these things, and then you've considered it beneficial, and you think that you gained something from this podcast, then consider being a patron, and you chunk a few bucks at me, and one of the perks that you'll get back in return is no ads and no fluff. All this stuff you're hearing right now is not in the podcast version that my patrons hear. They get their own special podcast feed. All this fluff stuff is out of it, and there's no commercials. Not only that, they get podcasts 4 to 5 days earlier than you. So if you're hearing this today, they heard this 4 or 5 days ago. Plus, there's some other perks in there as well. You can check out what they are by going to losewithmason.com, losewithmason.com. So let's thank those patrons. Hello, patrons. Cindy Carr, Bessie Williams, Kenneth Wilkerson, Bobby Houston, thank you for supporting what we do here. I really can't tell you enough what it means to be. It's humbled. Look, when you decide to chunk a few bucks at somebody, that's a big deal, man. I don't know anybody that's rich. I know a lot of people, and I don't know anybody that's rich. So when you decide to take a few bucks and chunk it at somebody, it means something, and it means a lot to me. So thank you so much for helping bring the podcast along today. We're talking about skin tags and what they mean. I'm going to tell you what they are, how serious they are now, more importantly, how serious they could be down the road, and what you can do about them starting immediately. Skin tags, you know what skin tags are. We'll talk about all that, but you've seen them. You probably have them. If you're listening to this, you probably have them. So we'll get into that in just a couple of seconds. Make sure that you follow us on social media. Fat Guy Podcast is the username. That's whether you're on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Fat Guy Podcast. Look us up on there. And subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Now, if you're a patron, this doesn't apply to you. But if you're not a patron, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That means a lot to me. So skin tags. What are these things? Well, they generally form around the neck. You'll find them in the neck area, especially on the side and back of the neck. Sometimes they'll pop up on like your eyelid in that area. You'll see them in the armpit area. And you'll see them in the groin area. There's these little skin growths that pop up. They don't hurt really. They can be small and tight and close to the skin. Some of them can get far away from the skin. And it was in 2015, I went to my doctor for an annual checkup. And we talked about a lot of things. And I was like, hey, doc, what are these things on my neck? They just grew up out of nowhere. I don't know what they are. He said, oh, they're skin tags. I was like, oh, my God, what's that mean? He goes, it's not a big deal. It doesn't mean anything. I'm like, are they dangerous? He said, no, they're not dangerous. I said, what causes them? He's like, nobody knows what causes them, but I'll be happy to cut it off for you. And I was like, I think I can cut them off myself. And that's all. I didn't know anything else about it. And I came home, thought about it a few days. I had some really tiny ones, but then I had a couple that were kind of big. And so I just went and got me some ice cubes and some rubbing alcohol. Put those ice cubes on those puppies till I numbed them up real good. Took a razor blade, whacked them right off even with the skin. Put a little alcohol on there, put a bandage on there, was good to go. And I'm not a doctor and I'm not giving medical advice, so I by no means recommend you doing that. Your doctor will do it for you. Nevertheless, I have had skin tags. And so it's not something that's foreign to me. Now, here's what's funny. A year later, I believe that was 2015. It might have been the end of 2014. 2016, I go in the springtime for a checkup, And they run my blood stuff, and the doctor's like, you know what? We've got it was either 2 or 3 readings of a fasting blood sugar, he said, of like, I think it was 116 and 112, and I don't know. He's like, you're pre-diabetic. He's like, you're not a diabetic, but you're pre-diabetic. And that caused me to get even more serious about losing weight and eating right, which led to a year later, I began keto, which was the best thing I've ever done for my pre-diabetes. Which brings me to my point about what are skin tags. Skin tags, tons of evidence about this. Skin tags are mostly caused by whatever is going on inside you that is insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes. If you have skin tags and you haven't already been diagnosed as pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, it's coming. It's on the way. You probably already have excess fat around your belly. You have these skin tags. They're unsightly. You may or may not also have browning of the skin, which will show up around your knuckles of your hand. It may show up in some of the folds of your skin. May show up around the back of the neck. This browning of the skin will happen as well. You got some metabolic issues going on. And so this is all part of this metabolic thing. Now, there's some indication that there is a small genetic component to it. So it's possible that there's genetics. But you can be genetically predisposed to it and not get it. It's probably mostly diet caused. No, I'm not a doctor. Not giving medical advice. I want to repeat that again. For medical advice, you should consult with a doctor. I am in no way dispensing any kind of medical advice to you. This is all my opinions based on my research and my study. So, what do you do about skin tags? Well, you heard the way I treated them. Your doctor, pretty much any regular old family physician right there in the office can whack the thing off for you. It's no big deal. It's painless. It takes a half a second. It's not a vital organ. You don't require any special procedures. They just whack the things off and you go. Now, I told you it's related to metabolic syndrome. I told you if you haven't been diagnosed with prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, these things, that's coming. And it is. What's exciting about that is what you can do and what I've seen happen. I'm a member of a couple of forums of low-carb forums. I'm actually a member of a lot of forums. Low-carb forums, keto forums, Atkins forums, carnivore forums, all these things having to do where people are limiting their carbs a slight degree, medium degree, or a large degree. And I can't tell you how many people, once they got off the carbs, skin tags started shrinking, and the skin tags were gone. Now, I told you way back in 2015, I had these skin tags. Man, I had the 2 big ones on my neck, which I cut off, but I had a lot of smaller ones. I had a couple up under my arm. I had one under my left arm. Well, I think I had 2 up under my left arm, my armpit area, and 1 under the right arm. They were like small to medium. They weren't large. They didn't bother me. And that's all that I had that I'm aware of. And I went keto and started losing a lot of weight. And by the time 2016 was over, after I switched to that way of eating, gone. Skin tags were gone. Had no more skin tags. They're gone. I didn't cut them off, didn't treat them, didn't put anything on them. So I'm one of those people. I've seen it happen. So that's what you need to do about it. Skin tags are the early warning. Do you remember the old canary in the mine? Miners used to carry the canary down in the mine with them, and if the gases that were deadly come out, it would kill the canary first, and they knew they needed to book it out of there. Our body gives us that canary in the mine thing. There's a lot of things that it tells us, and we just don't know it or understand it or listen to it. And skin tags, in my humble opinion, are one of them. Skin tags are not a disease. Skin tags aren't, disease type. They're a symptom. Skin tags are a symptom of a disease. They're a symptom of a process. So you got to change what's going on. You got to fix that. That's what you need to do. So there's a couple ways you can fix it. That's what you need to do about it. If you're not already low carb, if you're not already keto, you need to get there. That would be, what I would do if it was me. Now, again, I'm not giving you medical advice. Please know that I'm not giving you specific medical advice. So what's the scariest thing about skin tags? This is pretty much mostly me, based on a couple of lectures by some doctors I've watched, a couple of papers that I read on PubMed, just my general knowledge of physiology from the 6+ years of research I've been doing now, ever since my mom was diagnosed with cancer back in 2012, I think it was. And so that, just know that's what it's based on. But what else do we know in the human body whereby natural skin tissue that's normal, it's supposed to be there, or let's not even say skin tissue, just say normal tissue that's there, it serves a normal purpose, a healthy purpose, suddenly starts growing in a way that's abnormal and gets larger? What else do we know in the body that does that? Yes, cancer, tumors. Tumors are a part of your body. It was some cells that were normal, that were there to do a purpose. Something goes haywire. Suddenly they start growing. They completely ignore all the natural death signalers that you have, like apoptosis and things, and they just never stop growing, and you get these growths. Skin tags. Skin is normal. Skin cells are normal. It's necessary. It's vital. Why does it suddenly start growing? Why does it suddenly not replace itself and stay smooth? Why do you get these, you could call them nodules of sorts. Skin tags are a nodule of sorts. That's why it scares me. I suspect that if you have this, and don't get me wrong, skin tags are not cancerous, they're not malignant or anything like that. Skin tags are completely benign. I haven't read anything anywhere that says skin tags or anything other than that. So I'm not saying skin tags are cancer, but I'm saying that process. This process whereby cells proliferate and grow at an unregulated rate, and they do not die, and they cause these nodules, masses, growths. It seems logical to me that whatever that process is, if it's occurring on the outside of the body, it's possible it's occurring on the inside of the body. Something is amiss. And since I've seen it with my own eyes and read tons of stories of other people who have reversed this process by taking the carbs out of their diet, making sure that blood sugar gets back low, making sure that insulin gets back low and stays that way, can reverse and make these nodules, these growths, these abnormalities on the skin reverse and disappear. It seems logical to me that it's possible that you could cause that to happen on something inside your body that is reacting in the same way. Am I saying that a ketogenic diet is a cure for cancer? No, and I don't believe that it is. I do believe that a ketogenic diet, I do believe somebody that does not over participate in carbohydrate. I do believe that a person who puts ample time between feedings, where they're normally, like doing 16-8 or something, where they're not eating all day from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed, and they're not snacking and drinking empty calories and colas and sweet teas in between meals all day long, keeping their insulin levels chronically elevated all the time. Do I think those people can prevent some cancers? Yes, and I think there's evidence out there to support it. Do I think that eating that way can slow cancers once you have them? Yes, I've seen it. I saw it definitively with my mom when she ran out of chemos, and my mom was near death. And I really didn't think she was going around a long time. And there was not much else they could do. And she was wasting away. And I found keto, and I got her on this high-fat diet, and suddenly she was consuming tons of calories and nutrients that she couldn't consume before. And she started putting weight back on. And then she started getting healthier. She started walking around some. And then I remember it was like 2 or 3 months later, we went back in for our checkup. And I have actually part of that visit recorded on my phone. It's one of my favorite things to watch. I only recorded like 10 seconds of it. I recorded it on Snapchat. I wish I'd recorded the whole thing now, but I digress on that. It was amazing, the turnaround from where she was near death in January to where she was at in March. Now, did it cure her cancer? No. It's just a couple of months later, she started getting where she couldn't even do the ketogenic drink that I was making for her. But she had gotten where she was actually eating and stuff. So she was doing the keto drink I was making for her, and she'd got where she was eating again, something she hadn't done since January. And she had some decent months. She did. She had some decent months. They were out of chemos. They had no more chemos to give her. She was on this list for this experimental drug that they thought she would have in 3 weeks. 6 weeks later, she still didn't have it. 8 weeks later, she still didn't have it. It was this complicated rigmarole with insurance and approvals and all this stuff. And by the time they ever did finally approve this experimental drug for her, my mom was in such bad shape. She probably really shouldn't have took it, but my mom's will to live was so strong. She tried to take it, which just added to what was going on with her. Look, I don't want to get into too much of that, but I can tell you, if I could go back in time and change one thing, and I did research like you wouldn't believe when my mom got diagnosed with cancer. When my mom was diagnosed with cancer, I left my job, quit my career, and I devoted my life to study and research. There wasn't a paper or a study or literature on cancer that I didn't read. And there's a lot of them out there. If there was rat studies, primate studies, human studies, phase 1, 2, 3 trials, experimental drugs, naturopaths, doctors, natural cures. Look, I did research on all this stuff, and the things that there was any reasonable amount of evidence that may work, my mom tried it. And I got to give my mom trusted me. Now, she went to doctors and she had the doctors she trusted, but my mom put an enormous amount of trust in me. And we would talk, and I would find things, and we'd talk about them, and I can't tell you the protocols my mom tried over the years. She was unrelenting. God, if we could come up with it, she would try it. Some of them she couldn't do because she couldn't tolerate them after a while, and she'd have to quit them. Some she did her entire journey. Anyway, God, I've got sidetracked, and I don't mean to get into that, but if I could go back in time and change one thing, all that stuff that I knew about, pretty much with the exception of curcumin and fasting, would have been a ketogenic, not just a weight loss ketogenic, but an actual medical intervention ketogenic diet, which is even higher in fat. It's like 85-90% fat. Like you're hardly eating anything that isn't fat. That's what I would have put her on. Hopefully I could have talked her into it. And I believe this with every fiber of my being because of what I saw and witnessed. If I could have known about then what I know now, that if we could have got my mom on a ketogenic diet right after her surgery, and as soon as she recovered and she was back up and walking around, which took a long time, that surgery was so horrible she went through. It was so hard for her to recover. But once she got on her feet, if we'd have got her on a ketogenic diet, I believe my mom would be here today. I don't believe she would have died 2.5 years ago. Now, do I think we would have cured her cancer? I don't think so, but I do. The other things I've studied from how fasting, which we didn't know then. We didn't know fasting till the very end. I think her last 2 chemos she did, we were on the fasting thing, and she would fast 48 hours before her chemo, and then she would fast for at least 24 hours after the chemo. So it would be about 3 days of fasting total, sometimes 4. And I saw firsthand what that did for the chemo. Side effects, none. She had 0 side effects. It wasn't a problem. She just had a little bit of weakness. That's something you can't get around. And I think, because they had given up, they'd run out of chemos. Those 2 did more than the ones had done before. Anyway, do I think that you can slow down certain cancers? Yes. So that's why I think it's important that you adopt a low-carb, preferably ketogenic way of eating if you have skin tags. But even if you don't have skin tags, if you have belly fat accumulated in the abdomen region, you are insulin resistant, which is the same thing as type 2 diabetes to me. I'm sorry. It's just a very low level of it. It just has to get, your diabetes has to get so far out of hand that your body's going to hell before they diagnose you with type 2 diabetes. By the time your blood sugars get out of control, your insulin levels have been rising for about a decade, is the research that I've seen. Your insulin levels started rising 10 years ago to try to keep up with the demand of insulin-resistant cells to try to shovel glucose into the cells. And every year it gets higher and higher and higher until about 10 years later, it hits a wall. It can't do anymore. It can't produce anymore. And bam, your blood sugars go out of control. And they're like, oh, you got type 2 diabetes. Well, you've had it for 10 years. It just wasn't affecting you. You just hadn't seen outward symptoms yet. Because they weren't checking your insulin. When you go to your doctor, tell them, screw a blood test. I want a fasting insulin test is what I want. And if your fasting insulin is greater than 5, you got problems. You preferably want it around 3 or 4. You'd be in great health. If it's around 5, you're okay. 6, you're on the borderline. 7, you're off the deep end. Fasting insulin, that's the test you want. I've rambled into something else I should have never rambled off into. I hope that we've helped you in some way today with today's podcast. Share it with a friend. Who knows, you may help them. I humbly would request that you consider becoming a patron. It would mean the world to me. We will give you full credit on each and every podcast. You get full access, early access to me as far as questions. You get access to me as far as getting podcasts, 3 to 5 days earlier than anybody else. You get no ads in the podcast, and you help me. You help me pay for this cost of podcast hosting. It means the world to me. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe and follow us on social media. Fat Guy Podcast is the username. Share this with somebody whose life you could change. God, you just don't know. That's how I found out about this stuff. Somebody shared something, and it led me down the rabbit hole that got me here. Because somebody shared something. Sharing could change somebody's life. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much.